Morning. How are you, Raj? Good to see
Hi,
you.
yeah, very well, very well. There you are.
Yeah,
I can see you. Wonderful.
yeah,
I was just introducing this platform. And then I'll come to you in just a moment, Yogesh.
sure.
So, folks, we are. This is where we are bringing together different experts to sort of demystify different aspects of our food, our well-being, and bust some of the common myths. So today we have the session planned with Yogesh. Yogesh is a certified low-carb nutritionist. He runs this platform called Eat Right Monk. He's coached several people, many interesting stories he's got. So we'll learn about all of that. But the focus today for us is really understanding this very highly stressful aspect of our eating, which is protein. We're all told we need to have the right protein content, and somehow in our regular day-to-day diet, we find that we miss that the level of protein that people are recommending. At the same time, there are other people who are saying that, oh, this is all a myth. You don't need, the protein is not that important. There is some of that commentary also. So putting it all together and really understanding the science behind what consuming protein means and how we can include that in our different diets, and what some of the contraindications are. All of this is what we will be looking at today, together with Yogesh. Welcome, Yogesh, to this platform. This is the first Wellness Live we're doing together. So really great to have you
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely. And thanks for the invite. Feeling great to be associated with Pink. Following Pink for a while in terms of how it is shaping up, and seeing, amazing platform being developed. I've been basically trying to monitor this space quite closely in the Indian circuit, and there are a few, but I think Ping definitely is creating a niche out there in terms of what from an health and the healthy food standpoint. So we'll talk about that in the process,
Yeah,
right? So
wonderful. Thank you,
yeah,
Yogesh.
sorry, yeah,
So just as you're an erstwhile techie, right? You worked for,
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
and then you had this epiphany during, I think, when you were by yourself in the US, and
yeah.
since then you've started this journey very seriously. I was reading in your sort of one-word descriptors many things about your new identity, but one of the things that caught my attention is that you're also a biohacker.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
tell me about that. What is a biohacker? What do
yeah,
you do to hack yourself?
yeah. No, absolutely. I would love to do that. Before that, I would just like to basically throw some light in terms of how I actually get there. So it was a journey, right? Biohacking, definitely I'll speak, probably take maybe a couple of minutes. Since you mentioned about me being a techie, me getting involved into this probably for a few years. So I would just like to throw some light on that. So my first focused, let's say, this thing, involvement with health, fitness, nutrition got started way back in, let's say, 2005. When I was in the US, I was alone, and then I was basically trying to get into something, a lot of things which can bring positivity around me. I was not overweight, a lot overweight, but I thought of like getting into shape, start doing something else, being healthy, blah blah blah, right? So
Yeah.
I joined gym. I basically have tried a lot of different diets back then, like gym diet. I can go on air over here and talk about like I tried vegan, being a vegan back in 2004 while being in the US, California. So that stayed only for a couple of months, right? But my let's say association with exploring food, nutrition, the various kinds of diets got started over there. Within the span of, let's say, around, I would say 8 to 10 months, 8 months around, I must have lost 15 odd kgs. That was an amazing, and the surprising element is I was not even supposed to be getting down to that extent. I think I got down by, let's say, at least twice as I should have been, right? So, but it was an amazing experience. I was doing ton of cardio, then some kind of weights, but I could see great deal of difference in terms of my how I used to look, how I used to basically feel, right, in terms of energies and things like that. So I somewhere knew that I'm on track and I'm doing an amazing thing in terms of focusing on my own, on my health and fitness and things like that.
This is
Before even that, yeah, sorry.
Yogesh, sorry, just to understand, this is so
Yeah,
you explored different diets,
yes,
and then
yes.
for you, you found that this low carb diet is what was giving
No,
you the energy and it.
I'm yet to come to the lookup part probably in a
Oh,
bit,
okay.
right? But yeah, so this is interesting, and this is basically to get to understand that it may not be a straight line thing for everyone because many who are audience and many people who basically talk to us about their health and fitness, for most of the people in low carb or some of these spaces, it is not possibly a straight line kind of a linear kind of an progression or maybe the kind of achievement and success. So while I was doing all of that, I lost a lot of weight. I was on high carb. I was in my early
Oh,
30s back
okay.
then. And my metabolism was like at peak. I'm at prime, and I could basically consume anything that is thrown to me. Obviously, I was not doing a lot of refined foods or maybe junk foods and things like that, but I was eating ghar ka khana, the usual stuff. And then I came back to India. I basically still very rigorously following a lot of things, exploring a lot of things, experimenting with a lot of things in terms of food, nutrition, and things like that. I've been an avid, let's say, fitness this thing. I'm an enthusiast, so I was like doing workouts every single morning and things like that, right? So while I was doing everything that was possible in the vicinity of, I mean, in the this thing, I mean. Confines of what I was doing, the kind of demanding, let's say, professional commitments that I'm having, I was trying to stick to a healthy and fit kind of a lifestyle. And in the process, I was following doctors, I was following some other experts in this particular space. And I got to understand since my, let's say, dad was diabetic, that eating frequently is the kind of what I mean, suggestion or advice that was provided to him through the experts, to the doctors and things like that. So I started doing something which was like really very different than what I was doing. And in the process, what happened is while I was doing, I was having Garka Khana, I was doing a lot of exercises almost every single day and things like that. I came across a situation, metabolic disorder. My blood glucose levels were like a little bit on the higher side, borderline diabetes, maybe a little higher than that. And that was a kind of a shocker. And then onwards, the actual journey got started in terms of understanding why. Because my doctors used to tell, my diabetologist used to tell me that please do these things and you'll be great, right? I mean, I was on basically very entry level kind of a metformin back then. But I was not getting the answer that while you are telling me doing everything that was required to be done, I'm not able to be getting to the let's say numbers that I wanted to be. And that's where a lot let's say I intensified my search, my let's say study, whatever learning, and then I came across low carb. So it was almost 15 odd years or maybe 12
Wow.
13 years I must have spent in terms of yeah, in terms of on a high carb diet, first achieve what I wanted to achieve, then basically lost it because I entered my 40s. Lot of stress, lot of incorrect suggestions and advices that I basically must have captured, and that's how it impacted my this thing. I mean, my own metabolic health, right? And that's where I basically was doing again number of different things. I don't want to refer to all of those now, but when I came across, I formally studied nutrition back in 2016, 17. That's where I basically came across the low carb and ketogenic diets, and I started on this journey. So biohacking comes next, right? I mean, your original question. So I wanted to give a reference that this is something that has been happening in. I mean, and that's how I think many people who are like really great, fit, metabolically healthy in their maybe prime, like 30s, they can and when they continue their journey on those lines, they might start coming across a situation where and this is not only me, right? I mean, who have faced this. I mean, I came across a number of other stalwarts in this particular space, one being Professor Tim Noakes, right? I mean, he being a triathlete, I don't even want to compare, right? I mean, where he was. But he came across a situation when he became, let's say, predisposed to pre-diabetic and things like that. So that's the same question and let's say quest that he went through, and then basically then understood that all this while he's doing ton of cardio and other things, the kind of food that he's having is basically creating this particular situation. So anyway, so that was the kind of let's say realization that I've got, and then I basically jumped onto low carb and I could remit my condition. And basically, I then got started into this particular venture of Eat Right Month. Biohacking came next when, let's say, I started looking at number of different things, and then I was fascinated with fasting back then. So I also came across Dr. Jason Fung, his books, right? I mean, be it a diabetic code or this thing, I mean, the other ones, the obesity code, and then fasting is something that I was like really started focusing on. And what I do with fasting is basically I did fasting for up to like let's say 5 days water fast, right? I mean that is the longest that I've done. I'm not saying that's anything great because I know people who have been doing a lot more than that. But for me, I think someone who was like not metabolically healthy and when I couldn't even go for maybe 6 to 7 hours, 8 hours of fasting window, I could do 5 days, right? I mean, that was an amazing transformation that I've done. And then I started adding a lot more different perspectives or angles to that. Like, I mean, how I can start even work. I mean, I can work out, right? I mean, during the fasted state. So one thing that I've been constantly focusing on is in terms of how we can do a lot of different things, physical, even mental, right? I mean, while we are fasted. So that's the biohacking I've been doing. I was doing it with, let's say, glucometers and CGMs and things like that. This was like even 3 4 years back, right? And then I got to understand. I mean, just one or two examples that I can give. So one of the things that I've done was like at the 68th hour of fasted state, I walked for almost 10 kilometers, right? I mean, that's an amazing experience, right? I mean, the other thing that I would like to highlight over here is like I was constantly checking my blood glucose levels while going on these extended fast. I could see that even my blood glucose levels dropped down to 45 in a fasted state. I was still delivering these kinds of sessions, lectures. I was doing my workouts and things like that. Right? I mean, walking, driving, going places, talking to people. I mean, meeting people. So everything was happening in an absolute great manner while my blood glucose levels were like in a very dangerously low level. I mean, which is the prevalent sciences. But there is a context attached to everything, and then that's how I think once we start understanding our body, once we start understanding the science, right? I mean, we get to know that, I mean, a lot of things which are mentioned that if your blood glucose is falling below 70, you can go in a this thing, I mean, glycemic end for more, which is true for most of the people, but which might not be for people who are like almost got a great hang on in terms of their metabolic health, right? So a lot of different aspects that I was trying and getting to basically getting an affirmation that what I'm getting to see, learn, read and watch through all of these stalwarts, right? I mean, there is a lot of content that is available. I made sure that I'm doing most of these things, doing walk the talk, and then basically experimenting with a lot of these things before even I start, let's say, coaching people or talking to people in public domain about that. But this is probably a little longish version of biohacking. I just wanted to give a little more context to that because it is not, it cannot happen overnight. The other most important thing that I would like to highlight as a part of this session that we are having, there is absolute no advice. There is nothing, no medical advice here, no any other advice over here, because every body is very different. Everyone's I mean, this thing, metabolic health is going to be very different. Response is going to be very different. So a lot of these things have to be done in a very structured, gradual manner. So that's very important. So I'll take a pause. I think I must have given you some sense about biohacking.
Yeah, and the last point you mentioned is actually what I wanted to ask you about. That each our biology is different. Each person is different and responds differently. So through the biohacking, is there anything unique you learned, right? In the general food philosophy that you followed, like you respond certain way to certain foods. What did you learn there?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's a great learning. And then I think that became the part of my training process, right? I mean, when I coach people, when I train people, so this is what happens, right? And the title and topic for today's discussion is about protein, and obviously carbs also play an important role. Those are like kind of an not exactly, but kind of complementary. So we when we start hacking our body and getting an understanding about why exactly I'm gaining weight, or why exactly my blood glucose levels are not within the range. So a great hack that is available with everyone and not very expensive at all is basically using a glucometer. If not a CGM, at least a glucometer. CGM is an amazing tool. So whoever can basically be able to afford that, they should be using that. So why this is important is to get an understanding about reflection of a particular food on my metabolics. And the important metabolic aspect over here to consider is insulin and glucose, right? So once I get an understanding about key, let's say I've had usual, let's say carbogenic foods like idli, roti, right? I mean, number of different things that we are like really, really very affiliated to, and we are really happy having those kinds of foods. We have tagged them very innocently healthy foods as such, right? So, but when we start getting an understanding about, let's say, after eating two or three or four idlis, what exactly is happening, how my blood glucose is behaving, right? I mean, once we start getting an understanding about that, I mean, it's kind of a shocker. It's an eye opener. And then we get an understanding that instead of having, let's say, four idlis, if I basically have four idlis could be maybe, I don't know, 150, 200 grams. If I have, let's say, 200-gram paneer, what is the equivalent of that on my blood glucose levels? And that's, I think, the best kind of biohacking anyone can do. It is with you, it is wholly scientific. I mean, it is based on pure science. So that's an immediate reflection of, okay, if I'm gaining weight, it is basically because of my blood glucose levels or my insulin levels are almost, I mean, those are like continuously spiking up and down. If my, let's say, I'm having any other metabolic disorder, most of the metabolic disorders, be it hypertension, be it thyroid, be it PCOD. So a lot of those things would basically revolve around what's the kind of food that I'm ingesting, right? So I think glucometer, CGM can be the best gadgets. Those are available to get a complete hold on our own health as such. Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. And on a separate note, I know that the book you refer to, Abhay Bang, right? He said,
Abhay Bang. Yeah, yeah,
Abhay Bang, he wrote, you read his book and I think it changed your life.
yeah,
He's come up with a
absolutely.
new book. I should say it correctly. Yeah, Jeevanache Kai Karu.
Kai
uh,
group. Yeah,
so
right.
I
So
think that is
no,
his
that
next book. So I was curious whether this is another turn
yeah.
in your life journey.
Thanks for the recall. In fact, I would just like to throw probably touch upon that a bit because I would consider that was my life-changing moment, right? I mean, during that period when I was when my family was here in India and I was alone, I basically this book came to me and I read through that completely very small book. It's called as Maza Sakshatkari Hruday Rog. Basically, it's journey and reflection when he is a doctor, by the way, right? And then he practiced in US. He came back to India, and then he came across a situation when a cardiac event happened with him, and that was absolutely shattering, shocking because someone like him, he used to follow like what I've narrated about myself, or maybe even about the team, about Professor Team Noakes and all. He was doing fantastic in terms of his whatever I mean activity levels, his food and things like that. But he came across a cardiac event. Being a doctor, it was definitely I can understand. I mean, it wasn't easy for him, and that's how we went into kind of an introspection mode for next few months. And this book is kind of a summary of that introspection, and which led me to I mean that was kind of a path-breaking experience for me to go through that and get an understanding that a doctor being so honest, talking about a lot of these things, if it can happen with him, it can happen with anyone, right? I mean,
Yeah.
after following a lot of these things, and that's how I got on into that particular mode. And I'm really happy to say that last 18 years or maybe 18, 19 years, I'm still sticking to that kind of a thing. So that had very deep-rooted so the next book, obviously, I mean that has recently released, I would say, but I'm yet to get hold of that. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It is not just, I would say, about health, but it is reflecting on number of different perspectives about life, right? So I'm sure that there is going to be another learning, right? I mean, lifelong learning lessons that everyone probably would get through that particular book. So I'm looking forward to reading that. Yeah.
Yogesh, by any chance, do you know if it's translated in English? Or
Oh yeah, the first one definitely yes. Maza Sakshatkari Hruday is definitely
okay. I
translated,
was
and I
looking
believe
on.
it is available on Amazon. Yeah,
Okay,
Amazon
I was
as well.
looking yesterday. I couldn't
Yeah.
find it. Maybe I'll take a look again.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So now coming to the topic of protein, Yogesh, uh, there is a lot of emphasis, especially in the low carb community, about protein, and
Yeah.
that we should lower the carbs. I mean, you can go to keto, carnivore, like it goes
Yeah.
all the way, right? To basically that protein is the essential macronutrient. In
Yeah.
community, in food philosophies that are not low carb, also there is an emphasis on protein. Maybe it is not as high, but people do say that protein is the most essential macronutrient and you have to include that in your diet. And there is also recognition that it may not, in our day-to-day diet as we have it today, even if you're generally having home cooked food. Of course, if you're eating out all the time, then it's out of question. It's a SAD diet, right? Standard American diet. That type of thing. But even if it's home cooked, you may not be getting to that level of protein.
Yes.
So that seems to be a common thread, regardless of what food philosophy you follow, that protein is an essential macronutrient for you. So
Yeah.
I'd like to learn from you how can you sort of demystify this? Why is protein that essential macronutrient? And for example, carbohydrate is not considered to be essential, right? So can you throw some light on that and expand on this?
Yeah. And I probably would provide a little elaborate response to this, because we may not be able to understand the importance of protein in isolation. We need to get an understanding about a lot of things which are happening in a very incorrect manner in our lives, right? I mean, these days. So first of all, I think why we should eat food, right? I mean, food is possibly energy, nutrition, and I would say satiety. These three things are the most important things. And then the other thing, right? I mean, but what the other thing comes into play to a large extent, the other thing that I'm referring to is kind of an gastronomic delight, or basically pleasing the taste buds. So the food, basically, when we think about food, I think the first thing that comes to our mind is the taste, or maybe whether I'm having any affinity towards that food or not. I think we largely discount the key aspects, like, let's say, as I mentioned earlier, the nutrition and the satiety and energy kinds of things, right? I mean, which food actually provide, or we should be looking at food. Now, before even looking at key, I mean, let's say if protein is really required, or how much protein is required and things like that, I think we need to be doing a recall. And the way I basically am available in this particular space, or basically created my entity in this space, is coaching from a perspective that I provide a lot of thought-provoking kind of aspects to people. Because it's not like, I mean, if there are many experts in this space, and who are like giving some tips and advices, and people blindly follow that without even taking any effort in terms of understanding whether that tip is right or not. So I basically ask a lot of questions to my trainees, right? I mean, typically. So the question that we should be asking, that what exactly that I'm eating from morning to evening, and the answer to that is going to be something or the other which is highly carbogenic in nature. The carbohydrate content in those foods is a lot on the higher side. So when that is the case, then I think we are not doing justice in terms of balancing our fat, protein, and carbohydrates, which are the three important macronutrients, right? All of us know about that. So when I already know, let's say, I mean, I'll probably just do a quick review, right? I mean, be it any bakery products, most of the bakery products. So what I'm referring to now is, which is available like largely 99.9%, right? Because there are a Pynk like platforms are becoming available and providing amazing job in terms of giving really healthy kind of foods, right, to people. But otherwise, in most of the stores, most of the groceries, the kind of food that is available is not going to be protein centric as such. So if I look at bakery products, if I look at poha, upma, idli, right, I mean, our standard, it is not just a standard American, I would say. I started calling it a standard modern diet, right? I mean, so it's any geography that you go, you'll get to see, you'll come across the similar kind of foods with some variations. Like most of these are going to be grain based. So be it all the things that I mentioned, bakery, idli, poha, idli, whatever else that you want to look at, then roti, rice, bhakri, right? I mean, number of different things, variations that you go across pan India, you'll get to see that those are based on grains. Those are based on grains, and there is still a lot of, let's say, sugar, jaggery, honey, fruits which come into play. And if someone basically then talks about, oh, okay, but I usually have dal in my lunch and dinner and things like that. So what's the proportion of that dal, right? I mean, if you start diving deeper in terms of the dal, because I think that's the very common conversation that we get into, we usually get into, right? I mean, okay, I have dals and I have lentils and I have pulses and I have beans and things like that. So if you, most of us low carbers, we won't even call, and not because it's untrue, right? I mean, we need to start getting an understanding about the composition of foods. So dal is it protein rich as compared to grains, wheat and rice and ragi? It is having more proteins, but does that qualify it for becoming a protein rich product? Absolutely not. Because if let's say any grains are having around 70 to 80% of carbohydrates, the dals will have around 50-60% of carbohydrates, not much. If let's say rice and wheat has anywhere between 2 to 5 to maybe 8% of protein, your let's say this thing, I mean, dals will have anywhere between 15-20% of protein, right? So what you're getting is again a lot of carbohydrates when we refer to dals as protein source. So that's, and if you look at let's say a 2000 kilocalorie diet, I mean, just for example, right? I mean, I'm not here to talk about calories a lot. That, I mean, but I'm just giving a reference on a 2000 kilocalorie diet every day. Every person, if I mean a person is having, then almost 1500, 1600, 1700 calories are coming from carbohydrates, and there is very little that we are getting from protein and fats as such. So the question that we should ask, while we know that there are three macronutrients and at least 20%, these are provided by medical guidelines, most of the medical guidelines, 20% should, possibly more, can come from proteins. So 20% is around 50 grams on that 2000. So more than that, sorry. So a lot more than that, but at least 250, 60, 70% of protein has to be consumed. How much dal gives you? Let's say 100 grams of dal would give you around maybe 20, 25 grams of protein, right? I mean, and none of us would consume 100 grams of dal in one sitting. So barely, let's say 5, 10, 15 grams of protein that we are going to be getting out of dal every single day, which is very less as compared to what is even prescribed by, let's say, medical science. I'm not referring to anyone like me, any nutritionist. No, I mean, this is what medical science and institutes across the globe who talk about having at least that portion of protein in our diets, and unfortunately, it is not happening at all. So I think the question that we should start asking is what exactly I mean I'm basically caring about when let's say protein, the word protein triggers and fat also triggers various negative connotations in our mind. Instead of that, we should start looking at, I'm only looking carbs, carbs, carbs throughout my day. So why not protein, and what is wrong with protein? We'll talk about that probably in the subsequent discussion. But I think this is where I think we need to start changing our thought process about protein or even fat as well. Yeah. So.
And you were saying that the amount of protein that we take is less when we sort of audit our food in a day. What is the standard guideline, and what is your guideline for the amount of protein?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So see, the medical science and dietary guidelines, you can go to any literature across the globe. It talks about, it refers to around having 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kg of body weight, lean body weight. So what I mean, we can make it simple. Instead of 0.8 to 1.2, we can make it like 1 gram, right? And this is someone who's like have any age, gender agnostic, any age, and then people with a kind of a sedentary kind of a lifestyle, not even exercising. So person who's like having a very less active life across age groups, across this thing, I mean, should have at least 1 gram of protein per kg of lean body mass. So to make it even simpler, let's say a 70 kg person with a healthy weight, 70 kgs, that person's daily protein intake has to be around 70 grams, right? And then I think we also need to start qualifying that 70 grams is coming from, let's say, a first class protein source or a second class protein source. We'll talk about in a bit. But at least around 1 gram of protein per kg of body weight has to be consumed every single day, right? I mean, that is the standard guideline, I would say. And when it comes to consuming that through the kind of foods that we usually have, it is very difficult. So that's how we possibly need to start looking at different kinds of avenues which are available in terms of switching to, let's say, protein rich foods, or maybe having supplements, whatever shape and form that you want. I mean, we'll talk about that as well. But the standard guideline is having at least 1 gram. And as your, let's say, exercise activity levels increase, you need to be increasing that. As people age, their protein intake should increase, right? I mean, which is contrary. A lot of these things are contrary to the kind of, let's say, understanding that we have. So the other scenarios where we should be upping the protein is, let's say, pregnant women, breastfeeding women, then let's say people who are like the kids and teens, right? I mean, so while in anything which is in an anabolic mode, growing mode, they need to be having a lot more protein intake as compared to the let's say 1 gram per kg of body weight kind of thing, and it can actually go to even, let's say, 2 grams of protein per kg of body weight. When we intensify our exercise. I mean, if you look at bodybuilders, if you look at, let's say, elite athletes, they can even go to maybe 3.5 to 4 grams of protein per kg of body weight. But we shouldn't be even going over there. We can look at only 1 gram of protein. I think that's a very decent, let's say, or modest kind of an intake that every person should be looking at. Yeah.
And how is this like? How is your guideline different from the standard medical guideline as a low carb practitioner?
Okay, so I may not have any different, because what is being mentioned, or the guideline is for, let's say, a sedentary person, a usual person who's not exercising, but someone who's been, let's say, training with me, that person obviously is on a fitness regime, right? And because they're adding a lot of activities in their this thing, I mean, routine. People who are like also beyond 40 or 50 years age, their protein requirement has to be on the higher side. So because and that's how I do not stick to that 1 gram, which is really bare minimal, basic minimal. Possibly, I would like to talk about 1.5 grams of protein per kg of body weight, right? I mean, so the same example, if you take 70 kgs, person can have around 100 plus grams of protein every single day. Yeah.
Right. And you were just now mentioning that make sure that all of that comes from first class source of protein. Can you talk about that? So all protein is not created equal, obviously.
Yes, yes. So I think some of us probably are already aware of these aspects, but I would like to unpack that probably in a little detailed manner, right? So why first class and why second class, right? I mean, what is the difference, and why those are being called like that? So first class are all, let's say, either dairy derived or animal based proteins, right? And second class are all plant based proteins. So that's the major, that's a key differentiation. What happens in, let's say, dairy derived or animal based, the amino acid profile, proteins are made up of, let's say, a chain of 20 different amino acids, right? So all of those are being present in every single animal based proteins, right? But which is not necessarily the case with the plant based proteins. So they are lacking or having in limits some of the required amino acids as well. So that's the key differentiation in terms of referring one as the animal based as first class and the plant based as second class. So that's the main differentiation. We also need to be looking at the composition, like I mentioned earlier. So most of these, be it, let's say, dairy derived, like maybe whey, casein, could be paneer, cheese, or even if you look at any other, from egg, ranging from egg to any other non-vegetarian products, they will have very, very little carbohydrates. So their protein percentage is a lot more as compared to anything else. I mean, protein and fat as well in some cases, but there is a lot less carbohydrates, or probably zero carbohydrates in those kind of products. If you look at plant-based proteins, like, let's say, and I'm not referring to the supplements as of now, I'm referring to the food sources where these, where we can get the plant-based protein. So it can be dals, lentils, legumes, right? I mean, I'll come to the soya part later. But most of these will have a lot of carbohydrates as well. Like I said, any dal would have around 50 to 60% of carbohydrates. So I think we can talk about low carb also. I mean, why we are continuously talking about going low carb and not having carbohydrates in our diet? Because one thing that we already have set the reference or context to is my current diet. My day, basically, I'm having almost 90% of carbohydrates, 80-90% of the carbohydrates. That's really, I would say, a lot damaging towards our health. I mean, what is happening with our metabolic health, that's really the key trigger for that. So that's the first instance where we need to be getting an understanding that my carbohydrates are on the higher side, which is basically interfering with my insulin, my blood glucose levels, my metabolics, and that's how I'm coming across number of different kinds of disorders, including weight gain, including being diabetic, being hypertensive, and things like that. So to basically counter that, I need to be reducing my carb intake as such, right? I mean, and when I'm basically reducing my carb intake, so there is also a myth that is prevalent in this particular this thing. I mean, space, calorie deficient kind of diets, right? I mean, where basically people are being asked to eat less. That is not the solution, because anyone would be malnutrition if that person is eating less. So what we need to be doing when we are going low carb, and that is required not because it's a fad or craze. It is required because your body is not able to tolerate the kind of load that is happening, the carbohydrate load that is basically being ingested into the body. And the next two things which are available with us, which is fats and proteins, which we are not consuming at all. I would like to reflect on, while the topic is not about the fats, but why carbohydrate is on the higher side. We'll talk about because proteins already we spoken about. If it is like vegetarian person, or even let's say non-vegetarian people, they don't consume the amount of non-vegetarian foods those are required. Right? I mean, so their protein intake is not met on any given day as such. Same thing is with fat, because there is so much of fat phobia that is created that we started using non-stick cookwares. We started using just a drop of oil or things like that, right? So we don't even understand that we are the things that we have been consuming for ages, or our ancestral foods and recipes. We can get to see a lot of ghee, and that has been completely cut down, right? I mean, last several years. So while the topic is not about the fat, I just thought of like quickly reflecting. We have reduced fats and proteins both, but we have bumped up the carbohydrates. And the part of the issue is also about the accessibility to that kind of a food, right? I mean, which was not there even 40, 50 years back. So the kind of market that is being developed. So anyways, coming back, that's where I think we need to be making sure to get a grip on our health. We need to start upping proteins and getting to at least, let's say, 20 odd percent of our daily intake as such, and then basically also fat to a certain extent if we can. But that's the basis to understand. I probably have reflected on low carb also a bit. Why to lower carbs and then start increasing the proteins in a gradual manner, and then basically get to at least 1 gram per body weight kind of an protein intake every single day as such.
Yeah,
And then, sorry, coming back to the, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was bringing you back to the protein point in terms of complete. I think
Yeah.
what you were saying is the proteins are first class proteins are meat and dairy based, and
First
that
class.
is because they're
Yeah,
complete.
correct.
Their amino
Yeah.
acid profile is complete,
Yeah.
whereas
Correct.
for
Yeah.
for plant based, the amino acid profile is maybe incomplete.
Yeah. Right.
So I have
Right.
a follow up question for you there. There are several comments or several input that we get on plant-based proteins, for example, with I mean, not supplements, but like things like hemp seeds
Yeah.
and soya to some extent, tempeh,
Yeah.
where quinoa actually to some extent also, where we see that they come by with the tagline that it is all contains all 20 amino acids. So what's the difference?
Yeah. So a lot of those things are available in the market, and for vegetarians or even for vegans, I think those are definitely kind of go-to protein sources, right? So what happens with these? I think the better sources of, let's say, vegetarian or vegan proteins are like you referred, soy, tofu, and let's say tempeh, right? And so they definitely have a good amount of protein. And I would want to qualify it by adding one more word to it: organic. So if it is organic, let's say soy, tempeh, tofu, that is a lot better profile than let's say the kind of soy chunk products which are available in the market, right? So and then hemp seeds as well. I mean, those are definitely having a lot better protein profile as compared to chia seeds as such. But if you look at, I'll keep the hemp seeds aside, but otherwise soy products which are available, those at times are GMOs. Those are like genetically modified products. Those are like having a lot of anti-nutrients. They can basically impact hormones, typically estrogen for females, right? I mean, that can be an issue. It can, they're also basically not easily digestible, right? I mean, for many people, they can face some of these issues. So my let's say advice to people who are vegetarians or even vegans is like, I mean, if you don't have any of the sources, you can have, but make sure those are organic. That's one. Make sure that you're basically adding, let's say, some supplements as well if you want. I mean, if you can. But there's sorry, I mean, one important thing is about how the from a digestibility standpoint, how I mean, what's the kind of reflection that you're seeing from your gut, whether those are gut friendly for you, right? Because those are like a lot important things. And while having said that, we need to be also making sure that all the other parameters that I'll be talking about in a bit, like I mean, day-to-day activities, my energy levels, how I do feel about certain things, right? I mean, typically for, let's say, females, during their menses and things like that, are they interfering a lot? Some of these foods, are they interfering a lot in terms of their, let's say, moods or whatever other things? So we need to definitely start paying attention to some of these hormones. And if you look at most of these hormones, those would be governed by insulin. So while, let's say, being vegan or having these organic soy kind of products are good, we still need to be making sure that our carbohydrate intake is on the lower side as such. So that's very important. But yeah, thanks for basically checking on that particular thing. That was very important about the soy products. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. When would you recommend that someone take a protein supplement? And do you have a comment on plant-based protein supplements versus whey?
So very important question. I think many times we come across that, right? And then if you look at my first thing is my first, let's say, question to people is, and that's a very valid question. What's the goal, right? I mean, what is the need of going vegan or not having whey, right? I mean, so, and there can be, in very rarely, but yes, there can be a genuine medical this thing, when predisposition or maybe some condition that is preventing them from having lactose-based products, right? I mean, if, let's say, no non-vegetarian products is fine, but even not dairy, I think that there has to be a very strong medical case for that. And while talking to people, while going through their medical reports and things like that, I got a sense that most of the times there is no genuine medical this thing. I mean, ask for these kinds of things. So, anyways, let's assume that there is a condition that prevents that person from having dairy. Then obviously these people should be looking at some or the other vegan proteins, and those can be soy based, those can be many other these things are available. So we can look at those. I mean, anything that is plant derived then can be done, but I'll be still looking out for one thing is organic. I mean, how basically what's the quality of this particular these particular food sources? Then I would be looking at what are the kind of, let's say, additives in this particular protein product, right? I mean, soy or whatever other product. So because at times the quality, I mean, the underlying statement over here is like quality of protein, because as we look at you can get to see a lot of fancy kind of containers, boxes, there are a number of different things which are mentioned over there. But I would draw attention of every single person, not just whey protein container, but every other packaged product that comes in our home. Please start looking at the labels, because those are your guiding mechanism in terms of whether I should be going for this product again or not. Because when you get into the details of those, you'll start getting an understanding that there are like 20 different products which are making this, I mean, ingredients which are making this particular product. So, and then many of those are like kind of not required for your body at all. It could be coming from, let's say, additives, flavors, fragrances, color, right? I mean, number of different things. So the lesser these additives, I think it's probably, I mean, not every time, but probably a lot better product, right? I mean, that it can basically become, and we can start relying on that. So these are like some of the important things that we need to be looking at when choosing a particular product, right? Yeah. Sorry. And sorry, I mean, one thing that I again want to, because see, I may not be able to give that, maybe a challenge with me, but I may not be able to give a straight line, one single answer, because while having said all of that, I still need to be getting understanding about my gut, and my gut response that having a particular product, it can be whey, it can be casein, it can be even a soy based, let's say, protein powder, but how my gut is responding, because it's not like, I mean, yeah, I mean, your question is valid that some people are not, may not be lactose intolerant, but they may have some difficulties digesting any kind of maybe even casein or whey or things like that. So there are different variations available. There is something which is available, like let's say an hydrolyzed whey protein, which is basically pre-digested. So you can basically switch to that. But what I'm trying to say is, with from these discussions, I think people would need to get a lot of understanding and probably start getting a little closer to their own biohacking, instead of completely relying on, let's say, some expert talking, because that expert may not be able to cover every single aspect, right? I mean, while having these kinds of discussions. So I hope, I mean, basically, I wanted to highlight that particular, because it is very important for people listening into this.
Yeah, your talk about the labels reminded me. I was reading somewhere that reading labels, learning to read labels is more important than learning to code in this day.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. So I mean, just to basically add 30 seconds on that, there is a definite need to have this as, I mean, food and nutrition, at least some bit, as a part of our school curriculum everywhere. That is, I mean, we already have reached a stage when every individual, every person would need to be, that's like a basic right for people, I would say. That's not happening at all.
Yeah. Yogesh, can you talk a little bit about some common replacements we can make during the day, like a practical advice if people were to take away from our conversation? What are some common replacements in an Indian diet that people can make to up their protein intake?
Okay. So we are still definitely looking at upping the protein, right? I mean, and during the day, what exactly we can do. So let's start from the morning itself, right? Usually, I mean, we can certainly talk about maybe how the day can be spanned, and about fasting, intermittent fasting, all of these things. But let's assume that I'm basically having 8-hour window, eating window, and let's say 16 hours. I'm already jumped onto, let's say, maybe intermittent fasting, and we possibly could have discussed that, but let me take that liberty of jumping onto that. So let's say a 16-hour fasting window and maybe 8 to 9 hours of maybe eating window. I start my day at maybe around 8 or 9 in the morning, my food, and then I end it at, let's say, around 7, something like that. Maybe 6 or 7 in the evening, whatever. I mean, let's say 8, 9 hours. So, and I basically have spanned, I mean, spaced my food, let's say 3 meals across maybe 3 hours or 4 hours of gap between those meals. Breakfast is around 8 or 9, let's say lunch is around 12 or 1, and then dinner is around, let's say, around 6, 7, 8, whatever. So mornings, I think, instead of having any other, I don't want to refer to the kind of foods that we have, but I'll refer to what we can have instead. So let's say an yogurt or maybe an hunkered can make a wonderful kind of an let's say early morning or morning kind of a breakfast. You can add a number of different things to that, berries, whatever. I mean, number of different things that you can add to that and make it very interesting. You can add chia seeds, right? I mean, I'm trying to cover people who are like typically vegans, sorry, vegetarians. I'll talk about vegans, I mean, just in case if required, but otherwise egg can be an amazing breakfast. You can make it in any ways, and it is very quickly available, accessible, affordable, I would say. People who complain about not having enough protein foods, egg is the best go-to food that is available, and that's real quick, that is real affordable, right? So eggs, poultry, right? Eggs. And even boiling an egg, I mean, you don't have to be spending any time, right? I mean, maybe 15 minutes and you're done. So it can start with as basic as that, and then it can go to whatever extent that you want. But egg can be a wonderful distinct food. Then from a protein centricity standpoint, 2 eggs can get us maybe around 12 to 14 grams of protein, right? I mean, and not just protein, I would say amazing amounts of fats, cholesterol, which is already like, I mean, vilified, but a lot of nutrients that we can get, minerals and vitamins that we can get from egg. If not, I think we are talking about the curd or yogurt. I mean, uncurd and things like that. You can add chia seeds, you can hemp seeds, you can add multiple different things to that. The third thing that comes to my mind is, which I'm not really big fan of. I mean, when people are like not having deranged blood glucose levels and things like that. But green moong can be a safer bait. The green moong, the sprouted green moong can be again a little safer bait. You can make different preparations of that, right? I mean, just a chaat or a kind of a missile. You can do different kinds of pesaratus, dosas, idlis, blah. I mean, number of different things that you can make out of that, right? So these three can be my go-to, let's say, foods in terms of my protein centricity in the morning, right? Early morning. Then once the day progresses and once you start having nutrient dense foods, you may not feel like eating in between, but I'll talk about that as well. Your lunch could be the, let's say, if you're like a vegetarian, you can have, or vegan, you can have, let's say, paneer or, let's say, organic soy centric foods. That can be your main course because that is what I think we need to be doing when we want to let's say increase our protein intake. We need to be somewhere start reducing our carbohydrates as such. We spoke about that I think at length, but that's where I mean when I say paneer, usually what happens, I mean I'm here, or probably I'm known for giving a lot of stories, right? Because that's what I think gets registered into people's mind. We go to a restaurant in a group, in a family, with friends and things like that. And sorry, no offense to anyone, right? I mean, I've gone through that, but we order probably one paneer dish amongst three or four of us, and then we still focus on, let's say, rice and roti and number of different things. We order jeera rice and we order dal. Probably that one bowl of dal is for maybe 8 people. We and not just that, we basically order chicken handi. This is for masses, right? I mean, this may not be applicable for everyone, and there is no offense to anyone, but this is what usually happens. We order chicken handi, and probably again that gets distributed. Every person probably would get just one piece, right? So we are basically not even very let's say, I would say, authentic about having our protein intake at all. While we talk, while we say, while we claim that I'm a non-vegetarian person, if we really go through that non-vegetarian, foods in a week, that's going to be barely anything, right? So the same thing. So coming back, I think the lunch can be some of these things, and what I was referring to was let's say paneer. It is not like something that you have to be consuming along with rice and roti. It has to be completely flipped. My paneer bowl has to be, the soy bowl has to be on the higher side. I mean, if you happen to go to, let's say, restaurants like Baba Mama, right? I mean, I'm not too sure whether it's there in Mumbai or anywhere else, but so the kind of Japanese soups and other things that you can get amazing tofu and preparations, right? I mean, which are like very satiating, which can basically give a lot of nutrients and things like that. So start looking at turning around things, and which we are traditionally calling as healthy. We need to start getting understanding those have not remained healthy because our lifestyle has completely changed. I think we can talk about that later. Once we come to the dinner, I think it can be similar soups that I mentioned, or maybe even the similar kind of preparations that we have done. It can be even great smoothies, different kind of smoothies with some, let's say, protein supplements and things like that. But there are a lot of different ways where you can basically start consuming protein in a very, let's say, diligent manner, or we need to be making sure that the protein is there in every single meal that we are having. In between, if you want, you can have, let's say, cheese can be a great thing to have. Cheese has a good amount of protein, very less carbs. You can have, let's say, things like, again, a boiled egg doesn't harm, right? At any point in time. You can basically have, again, I probably would go back to paneer if, let's say, someone wants, but like, let's say, saute paneer can be a great in between meals kind of a snack, right? So a lot of these, where I come from is like basically how we can optimize our life a lot when it comes to food, because a lot of time is being spent in terms of grocery, prep up, cooking, and then cleaning, right? So when it comes to food, and we absolutely don't want those kinds of things at all. When we start consuming nutrient dense foods, I think everything starts falling in place. So this is very important. So I think these are the sources. Then a few other sources, like you referred to, hemp seeds can be one, chia seeds can be another. I mean, chia seed pudding can be a great thing. And then the next things that come, which are not necessarily protein centric, but nuts in small proportions can be good. Let's say almonds, walnuts, those kinds of things, maybe Brazil nuts, macadamia, and things like that. So again, not very protein centric, but I would say a lot better than having a cookie or maybe a diet chivda and those kinds of things, which are only carb centric as such. I mean, and most of those, I mean, again, many platforms like yours probably are launching foods which are going to be healthy and helping people, but most of those which are prevalent in the market, already people are being used to that. Because I've gone through that. I was doing a lot of these things, considering those to be healthy, like a diet chilla. like let's say having dates in between, right? I mean, dates definitely are not. So those are like very carb centric, fructose centric kind of foods. So, anyways, I think yeah, this is how I think we can look for our protein. I mean, proteins in our diets as such.
Awesome. There are
Yeah,
some comments
yeah.
coming through, so let me
Okay.
take that. Uh,
Yeah.
Web77 says, true, it's not a straight line, but a journey only, and one who has walked that path won't be going back ever. Tushela saying, Dr. Fung, heart, I can vouch for this. And I think it's dlife.in. It's saying it's a treat watching Yogesh speak, Yogesh.
Thank you.
And and web is saying true carb suck, all types, simple, complex, etc. That's a bit carb hater there. Beyond Bread Bake says so true. Tishala again saying that's so apt. Glad you mentioned this. Non-vegetarian people consume meat apparently twice a week, which is more gravy and less pieces. Even when you travel abroad, you have so many protein vegetarian options, shakes easily available.
Yeah.
Modular Man says, great initiative, guys. You're definitely making a positive impact. Keep it up. Thank you, Modular Man. Vishala says, thank you. It was wonderful. So thank you, Yogesh. We are at the end of our session. I had planned to do we're at the end of our time. I planned to do a rapid fire with you, but maybe I'll just ask you one quick question. One question. You've been a coach yourself. But if you wanted to be coached by somebody on diet and lifestyle, who would that be?
So, yeah, probably a little expansion of the response, but I would say the first person who made a very deep impact on my life was when I was studying nutrition for the first time, formally for the first time in my life, and I came across a number of different things was through K11. He's no more. I mean, I'm referring to Kaizat Kaparia, sir, right? I mean, so he definitely was the kind of coach. I mean, I got molded. I've been very self-motivated, self-driven, but I could get to understand what exactly it needs to be a coach in this particular space, right? So while I was not trained with him, I can see the kind of, let's say, a number of different emotions and passion that is attached with this profession. But having said that, I think my recommendations would be to start. I mean, people in general to um, start following doctors, right? Because see, if let's say an XYZ, a Yogesh Dixit, anyone else talks about this, as compared to a doctor talking about a lot of these things, like I mean, I'm sure that Dr. Trishala is here, should agree, but that makes a lot of impact, and people get, let's say, get adjusted to that particular advice rather quickly. So I followed very deeply doctors, like let's say I mentioned about Dr. Jason Fung, Professor Tim Noakes. I've followed, let's say, Dr. Gary Fetke, Dr. David Unwin. There are many of those may not be able to cover, but if we can start, let's say, following the body of work of these doctors, right? I mean, and then the kind of passion that they bring in, and the kind of most of us, right? I mean, I think D Life definitely I would like to refer, because that is something that I've started getting a lot more deeper with let's say not just the diabetic but many other aspects of metabolic disorders. There are like tons and tons of let's say great sets of experts which have got connected through D-Life, and I may not be able to take one name, but they're doing fantastic kind of a work. I mean, the platform itself, which was founded, was amazing. But otherwise, I believe Shashi was here, right? I mean, last episodes, and he's basically treated one particular person having a CKD, right? I mean, very chronic kidney disease that got basically kind of healed, improved. Sorry, are you able to hear me? I'll just take
Yes.
1 or 2 minutes. I think okay. So basically, there is another lady that is my peer, low carb, right? I mean, she basically Ira, right? I mean, Ira Sahaj. She basically has improved her kidney condition as such, and that's all on, let's say, either low carb or carnivore kind of diet. So there are people who are amazing sets of experts in the Indian circuit. But what I'm trying to say is why doctors is because that's a lot more authentic. Their reach is a lot more. They have done these with their patients which is being, let's say, recognized at even the medical institutes and things like that, conferences. So that's how, while we are doing our bit, I would still look at people like doctors who are in this space and who are doing an amazing work with their patients, and also trying, I mean, creating great deal of awareness with the public, I mean, with the common people as such. So that's, I think, a little longish response, but I thought of mentioning every single person that I've interacted with or maybe got inspired with. So yeah, right.
Thanks, Yogesh. That was, yeah, you
Yeah,
covered a lot of ground there. So I
yeah,
think we are at the end of the hour. So I just want to take a moment to thank you for joining us today. You covered a lot of different variety of topics, answer questions in detail. It's been very useful and very informative for all of us. So thank you so much. And folks joining us live or joining in later, please do send us your comments on what kind of sessions you would like, and if you have any further questions on this topic that you want us to deep dive on, we'd be happy to address that. So thank you so much, and I'll ask you to offer your closing comments, Yogesh.
sure. So first of all, wonderful. Thanks a lot for the invite, and really glad to have speak about. I mean, so it was not, I think, very structured this thing, I mean, discussion as such. I mean, from my side at least. But since it is a very, I mean, subject which is the most closest to me, I think I like to throw whatever that I've learned, and the kind of understanding that I've developed, which can help people, right? I mean, and that's where the coach aspect kick in, right? Because if I'm just a nutritionist or a dietitian, I don't see I'm doing a full justice to my role or what I want to do in life, right? So this is all about making sure that people are getting the most appropriate understanding about their health, metabolic health, and things like that. So sorry if I've gone a little, I've extended some of these responses a bit, but I'll try and improve on that. I would look forward to basically be part of Pynk and some of these discussions. If you feel, let's say, some missing credit to this, we can definitely get together a little more frequently than this. And the most important thing is, I'm really delighted to see the Pynk, how it is shaping up, the platform that you have created, the website that is being created, the online this thing, I mean, e-commerce platform. That is amazing. The kind of spread that you have is great. I mean, be it vegetarian, vegan, keto, low carb, right? A number of different kinds of things, and I'm really happy to see. I mean, I want to attribute probably towards your tech background, the way it has been structured. So, I mean, while we are so accustomed to seeing Amazon, right, or maybe any other website,